Today on the Tech Bytes podcast, we discuss SD-WAN and SD-branch deployment with an auto dealership. They have 19 locations across the United States, and this business needed a more efficient way to connect their locations, make sure they've got high performance on their critical applications, and they need security capabilities to meet regulatory requirements for protecting customer financial information. Now, our sponsor today is Fortinet, but instead of hearing from the vendor, we're talking to Shane Williams. He is Director of IT, and Paul Provorst. He is System Administrator, both of the White family auto dealerships. And besides SD-WAN, we're going to talk about how and why the company is using Fortinet AP, switches, firewalls, and other gear at its locations. So Shane and Paul, welcome to the podcast. You two are part of an IT team. You're supporting a bunch of dealerships across the country. What was your network situation like sort of before and after you went to SD-WAN?
Before, we were relying upon an MSP providing network services, support, and we had a lot of issues over the years gathering information or solving problems or getting answers to things for C-level. Mm-hmm. So we tried to capture the network infrastructure so that we had a better view into things and control. The car manufacturers have some strict security requirements that we have to abide because we're handling financial information for customers.
Yeah.
So you had this MSP and you're feeling a sense of frustration. There's often two ways that could go. One way is that the MSP is trying to do their best, but the technology they've got isn't up for it. You know, like if you're running an IPsec point-to-point network, that can be a struggle to manage that and keep it going. Or do you think it was just the MSP was struggling internally? Maybe the business had sort of changed over the years and wasn't able to operate effectively. Was it one or both of those, do you think?
More often than not, if we would call from a problem, you would get somebody that wouldn't understand what we were looking for or what to do to correct the problem. So then we would get handed down to the next tier of support, or you would sit on hold for hours. So I think it's more of the company struggling, but I'm sure both are a factor in some degree.
And so you decided instead of struggling with this MSP, you were just going to do it yourself. You settled on Fortinet as your primary vendor, and you kind of went all in, right? You're doing SD-WAN, you're doing firewalls, you're doing their wireless APs and switches. Yeah,
the platform as a whole has worked very well for us. All the different pieces of it. They talk well, communicate, automation. It's satisfied everything we were looking for.
And how did you land on Fortinet?
It initially started from General Motors. General Motors was trying to push FortiGates on all the dealers, but using another MSP to manage those. Mm-hmm. So I took the idea of using the FortiGates, but managing it ourselves instead of paying somebody else to do what we were trying to get away from in the first place.
Right. Okay. So you said, sure, I'll go with Fortinet, but I'm doing it myself.
Right.
That's kind of brave. So I guess it's been a couple of years. You feel like that was definitely the right choice?
Yes, I do. Like I said, everything works. We can see everything that's going on day to day. Yeah. I'm not spending hours on the phone. Waiting for answers or support.
So Paul, when Shane says visibility, he can see what is going on. Does he mean like he can get charts and you can see how much bandwidth is, or you can see it, or is he talking about you can configure stuff and you can see what the configuration is? How does that look to you?
Everything from policies to devices on the network. I mean, it's we have full visibility into the entire edge to network access layer. And then we have integrations with other Fortinet products such as FortiEDR that can actually, detect a compromised host and disable the switch port and quarantine the device. And
right.
The whole thing just meshes really well.
So you using this whole portfolio, did you start with firewalls and kind of add piece by piece, or did you sort of jump right in with everything?
We started with just the FortiGates, and then decided to add switches after we were done deploying all the FortiGates. And we quickly seen the potential with the Fortinet platform and started adding more pieces to it and seeing how everything goes together well.
And I'm assuming, I'm going to take a guess that you probably don't have an IT person at every dealership. So are you having to do all of this management and policy setting and operations remotely?
Yeah, we're doing everything remotely. A lot of the configuration can be done with the FortiManager. If we need to deploy a security policy to all of the firewalls, for example, we can just do it from that one spot. and push it to all of them instead of having to reinvent the wheel 20 times.
Right. Okay. Instead of logging into each device and setting that policy, you've got one location to push it out everywhere.
Correct.
Okay. And that applies to the switches, the APs, everything?
Yeah. FortiManager has a component to manage all of those different components.
It sounds like SD-WAN wasn't initially on your radar. How did you get involved in the SD-WAN component?
So another goal of ours was to have redundancy for the internet services. So that's where we noticed the SD-WAN features in the FortiGate and decided to give that a try. And it's worked very well for us. Instead of having a secondary internet service, for example, just sitting idle, collecting dust and being paid for. And now we can use them both at the same time.
So let me ask you a quick question. You've gone from having an MSP managing it all for you. Now, I assume that includes the circuits and the bandwidth rentals and all that sort of stuff. And now you're managing it yourself. Does that not add a burden? Some people say they're frightened of managing all the extra connections themselves. Is that something that is a struggle?
Well, no, it's not necessarily a struggle. I enjoy my job. I know Paul does, and we work well together. We enjoy what we do, and I love learning new things. And this has been kind of like, we think of these things as toys more than devices.
So this is sort of like a strategic decision, but you also get to indulge doing something you really like doing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a win-win.
But it's not painful. Like, it doesn't sound to me like sometimes managing, you've got 19 sites, you're going to have at least 40 odd connections that you've got to manage and bill and invoice. Is that particularly painful to do? Or is it just like, it's actually so much better than it was before? It's like, that's not a problem.
No, it's much better than it was before. Like I said, all of everything that we need to know, it's easily accessible. I'm not trying to BS the CFO with answers to things.
And he knows that you're doing it as well. And he's sort of going, like, I know he's trying his best with what he's got, sort of thing. And so
right.
Yeah. Now, your apps that you're running in-house are actually quite significant. We haven't touched on this because it didn't occur to me until we were chatting in the prep that a car dealership is actually a financial institution for some purposes.
Yes, definitely. We're considered a financial institution, and we have a lot of private customer information for the financial applications for cars, credit card transactions. We have PCI compliance requirements, and the manufacturers are very serious about security. If there is a breach at the car dealerships, it's going to most likely affect their brand as well.
Right. So,
which is now your problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So did one of the things about PCI in particular, it's got a lot of specifications, but they don't say use X, Y, or Z particularly. Did you find it difficult to meet an auditor's requirements when you sort of rolled out this Fortinet package?
It actually made it easier. And a good example is the credit card terminals. Now we can easily have somebody plug in a credit card terminal. We can segment that terminal on a VLAN that doesn't have access. We don't like to keep the door open to the credit card terminals.
Yeah. So you actually put it into like a micro segment, so it's isolated from the general dealer traffic.
Yeah, like a sandboxed VLAN,
right,
which was one of the PCI requirements.
And you've got a simple way when the assessor shows up to say, yes, here's how we're meeting, all of these X number of requirements.
Yeah, it's very easy to get the proof they require.
It's pretty easy, actually. If you've got a centralized management console like the FortiManager, it's really easy to just say, yeah, here it is here. See this, and this is all of our terminals. Whereas before you would have had to show paper configs and done this is what it, and they would have run around to each site and followed cables. And now it's a lot easier, isn't it?
Oh, yes, definitely a lot easier.
So speaking of segmentation, I assume, since you've got customers coming in and wandering around the floor and looking at cars and probably checking their phones to see if they can get a price somewhere else or whatever, or just watching videos while they wait, are you providing internet service to customers, and how are you handling that given all the security requirements you have around privacy and so on?
Yeah, we have guest Wi-Fi at all of our locations. The Wi-Fi SSIDs are on a tunnel mode. They're segmented from the business Wi-Fi. Other than that, though, it's kind of the Wild West for the customers and their Wi-Fi space. We're not there to police that. It's usually at your own risk.
Okay, so you're not setting up any URL filtering or anything. They can do what they want, but it's separate from what you're up to.
Right.
You could send it off to a service and get it scanned, but I think at the end of the day, the secret here is that you feel safe enough in the solution, and you've passed the audits for it to give guest Wi-Fi on the same physical infrastructure as you're using for business.
It's on the same physical infrastructure, but it's segmented from everything else.
That's
Sandbox.
Right. And you feel, and the point here is that you're confident enough in the configuration of it and the operation of it to do that. Because if you didn't, you would actually have it completely isolated. Perhaps like a lot of companies say, yeah, we do that, but they have a separate internet connection and a separate router and a separate Wi-Fi to do that. But you're not doing that.
No, that's not we haven't encountered anything yet, thankfully. But no, I'm mostly confident that that's not going to be an issue, at least yet.
So, Paul, I assume, you're one of the people sort of in the cockpit piloting this machine. Do you feel like you have the visibility, the tools you need, that you're confident every day that you can get your job done?
Yeah. So, with SD branch as a whole, we have FortiSwitches and APs, and, it'll go ahead and we have the ability to extend our firewall security out to the wired and wireless networks. And this gives me more device visibility, with the centralized management platform.
And that visibility, the flip side of visibility is it can be overwhelming. Do you feel like you're getting too much thrown at you, or is it presented in a way that's consumable?
No, it's definitely presented in a way that's consumable. Everything's nicely segmented in the GUI, so nothing seems overcomplicated. It's really easy to get where you need to go and find the section that you need to go to in order to take a look at whatever might be going on in the network.
Here's my favorite question around new technology. And my test is what I call the 5 o'clock test. Am I going home at 5 o'clock more often because I'm not being called up or I don't have to work late? Does it pass that test for you?
It does. I still have that uneasy feeling still